I never thought a simple pen could change my life. It wasn't just any pen. It was a sleek, expensive Mont Blanc, handed to me by my CEO after a long day of negotiations in Shanghai. I smiled, said thank you, slipped it into my bag like a polite token of appreciation. But later, in the quiet of my hotel room, when the city's neon glow flickered across the curtains and my laptop hummed with unread emails, I twisted the cap open. Inside the barrel was a small silver key. Cold, heavy, real. And I knew instantly it wasn't meant for an office drawer. NNTHAT moment split my life into two timelines, before the key and after it. Before, I was just the invisible interpreter in a glass tower, someone who lived on takeout noodles and overworked lungs, someone who kept her head down and delivered flawless translations. After, I became something else, the object of attention I never asked for, and maybe the pawn in a game I didn't know existed, and I had always admired him from a safe distance. He was the type of CEO who made entire rooms adjust their breathing when he entered. Polished suit, watch that cost more than my rent for a year, and eyes that never revealed what they were calculating. People called him ruthless. To me, he was just untouchable. Until that night in the hotel, when the touch became metaphorical, slipped into my bag disguised as a gift. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a symbolic gesture. Maybe it wasn't a key to his apartment. Maybe it was a quirky collectible, a cultural thing I didn't understand. But then my phone buzzed on the nightstand, screen lighting up in the dark. A message from him. Some doors only open for those I trust. Mini hook. What if trust was just another word for control? I'm 29, an in-house interpreter riding the elevator up the spine of a glass tower in Luzhui, the side of Shanghai that looks like a screensaver until you notice the cigarette smoke curling in alleys behind the skyline. My days are a choreography of headsets, water pitchers, and simultaneous translation that leaves my brain buzzing like neon even after the meetings end. I liked the clean edges of the job. Capture the meaning, don't add your own. Precision over poetry, safety and clarity. There was a golden stretch when everything felt earned. I had a tiny studio near Jing'an Temple, a kettle that clicked at 6 a.m., and a routine that steadied me. Laps around Suzhou Creek before sunrise, protein bars in my backpack, a spreadsheet tracking billable hours like a quiet confession to the future. He noticed my reliability the way a pilot notices crosswinds, professionally, without intimacy. I preferred it that way. Respect is easier to metabolize than attention. NNTHE first red flag arrived as convenience. A latte appeared on my desk with my name spelled correctly. Harder than it sounds when your name sounds like 3 languages at once. Later, a slide deck came back with my annotations preserved and a note that I was the only one who hears the signal in the noise. Compliments land differently when they create debt. The office smelled like printer toner and cedar cologne, and I told myself it was nothing. Then the attention became choreography. During a quarterly town hall, he referenced our interpreter as the reason a tense deal had stayed alive. People turned to look. My cheeks burned under the LED stage wash. I laughed it off in the restroom with the hand dryer roaring like a jet engine. Afterward, he lingered near my workstation, asking about my commute, my goals, my Mandarin electives, as if data about me were a pipeline to be acquired. I watched coworkers drift by slowly, like the way people pass a car crash. And I archived his messages into a folder labeled admin, pretending they were calendar invites. When a line suggested I was overthinking, and that I should learn to accept trust without suspicion, I recognized the shape of it. The kind of logic that sounds generous but removes your ability to say no. The subtext was loud. If I bristled, I'd be too sensitive. If I set a boundary, he would later call it just a joke, proof that I lacked a sense of proportion. 2 phrases, 2 levers. I kept the pen on my nightstand and the key hidden inside a mint tin. I decided it would stay there until I forgot it existed. But forgetting is hard when the metal holds the temperature of your palm like a memory. Mini hook. I thought I could file the whole thing under miscellaneous and move on, until the room started watching us like a rumor with a timestamp. The weeks after the pen incident felt like walking on glass in designer shoes. He didn't say the words out loud, but everything was a performance. Little gestures designed to be noticed. A coffee order with my name, spelled perfectly left on my desk. A deck returned with highlighted lines, and the note, "Only you see what others miss." My inbox became a private stage, each notification glowing like a flare against the gray cubicle walls. Then came the town hall. Hundreds of employees, bright lights bouncing off polished marble floors, the air heavy with perfume and anticipation. He was on stage, commanding attention like a conductor, and I was just another shadow in the crowd, or so I thought. Midway through his speech, he paused and said, "And of course, I wouldn't have survived these negotiations without our interpreter." A spotlight flickered toward me. My throat closed as faces turned, measuring me, measuring us. The applause felt hollow, like clinking cutlery in an empty banquet hall. NNTHAT night, during the gala dinner, the performance escalated. His hand brushed mine under the table, lingered, pressed. The tablecloth hid everything except the rush of blood to my face. His wife laughed at a story across the table, oblivious, while he leaned just close enough for me to catch the cedar and smoke of his cologne. My phone vibrated in my lap. A message lit up. "Don't be afraid. Some things are meant to be secret." My fork trembled against porcelain NNTHE following week. He called me into his office after hours. The floor was empty, city lights flickering through the glass like Morse code. He set down a folder, then the pen. He looked at me as if I owed him something already. "You know what that key means?" He said softly, almost like a dare. My stomach turned. I wanted to say no, to return it, to leave. But the door behind me clicked shut with that sharp, unmistakable sound, and for a second it felt like the room had locked itself. Mini hook. I told myself I was imagining it, that doors don't close on their own. But what if I wasn't imagining him either? The key burned a hole in my bag. I carried it everywhere, tucked inside that ridiculous mint tin, as if pretending it was harmless could make it so. Every time I reached for gum, the cold metal grazed my fingertips, and my chest tightened. It wasn't just a key, it was proof. Proof that he wanted me inside a life that wasn't mine. A life that already had a wife's dresses hanging in the closet. And I kept telling myself I could handle it, that if I stayed quiet, maybe it would fade. But the office had ears. Whispers moved faster than emails. One afternoon, while I was translating a call, I felt the prickling heat of someone's stare. I glanced up. The head of HR, leaning in the doorway, pretending to check her phone but not really looking at it. That night, at 12:47 a.m., a message popped up from her personal account. "Everyone sees how he looks at you. Choose carefully." NNTHAT was the moment the fog lifted. I wasn't the only one trapped in his performance. I was the spectacle. And if I didn't take control, the story would be written for me. By him, by gossip, by anyone who wanted leverage. I opened the mint tin, placed the key on my desk, and just stared at it. The silver caught the blue glow from my laptop screen, like it was daring me to decide who I wanted to be. And I printed out the chat logs, every line where his compliments bled into commands. I placed the screenshots next to the key, slid them all into a manila envelope, and locked it inside the office safe I managed. The click of the lock echoed in the empty room like a gavel. For once, the evidence wasn't in his control. It was in mine. When he texted me again, "Don't overthink this, you'll ruin everything." I didn't reply. I just let the phone buzz until the sound became background noise, like the hum of the minibar fridge. And for the first time in weeks, I slept without clutching that key under my pillow. Mini hook. I thought I had taken back the power until I realized he was about to hand me over to the wolves himself. The next morning, I walked into the office earlier than usual. The city was still waking up, taxis spraying mist off the wet asphalt, and the glass of the tower was fogged by the damp air. My sneakers squeaked on the marble floor, each step echoing like a warning. I had the envelope tucked under my arm. Key, printouts, everything. It felt heavier than it should, like it contained not paper but the weight of my own silence. And I didn't go to his office. I went straight to HR. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, and I could see the confirmation there. She knew. She gestured for me to sit down without a word, as if we were co-conspirators already. I placed the envelope on her desk, my hand lingering on it just long enough to feel the rough paper against my fingertips. I told her I wanted this on record, nothing more. Not gossip, not confession, just facts. NNTHAT afternoon. He summoned me. The door shut behind me with that same sharp click. The air smelled of cedar and espresso. He held up the empty pen, his jaw tight. "You always ruin the simplest things," he said, voice low. "It was just a gesture. You're too sensitive." The words landed like a slap I couldn't show. I kept my gaze steady. I told him the key was logged, the messages archived. His smirk faltered for the first time since I'd met him. "Do you know what happens when someone like you makes enemies in this industry?" he whispered, leaning so close I could hear the catch in his breath. "Without me, you're no one." NMY hands were shaking under the table, but I forced myself to nod slowly. Not agreement, just acknowledgement. The same way I'd nod when translating phrases I didn't believe in. And then I said the only line that mattered. I wouldn't be part of his performance anymore. NNHE stared at me, as if recalculating the deal. For a moment, I thought he might laugh, call it all a test, erase everything with one of his polished smiles. But the silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. He pressed the pen flat on the desk, like he was stamping a contract that no longer existed. So Mini Hook. I walked out of that office with nothing in my hands, and yet somehow more power than I'd ever had. A week later, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were headlines. An anonymous tip had reached one of the business blogs that thrived on corporate scandal. A photo of him exiting a hotel at midnight, jacket slung over his shoulder, no wife in sight. The caption read, "Shanghai's coldest CEO, suddenly warm?" It spread through group chats faster than any press release we'd ever translated. NNHE tried damage control. Of course, meetings were called, PR teams scrambled, statements drafted in rooms that smelled of burnt coffee and panic. I sat quietly in the back, headset on, pretending to translate, while inside I was watching a man choke on his own strategy. Every denial sounded thinner than the last. Every "this is for the company's good" rang hollow, like glass about to crack. When the board convened in a private suite overlooking the Bund, I was asked to join as interpreter. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he clung to the table, knuckles pale, as the senior partner slid the envelope across to him. My envelope. The one with the key. The room fell into that eerie kind of silence, where even the air vents seemed to hold their breath. NNHE opened it. His own pen lay inside, heavy and incriminating. The key glinted in the chandelier light. The printed messages stared back at him like a verdict. He tried to speak, but the words came out brittle. This was nothing. A misunderstanding. She reads too much into things. I almost laughed, because for the first time, it wasn't my word against his. It was his handwriting against his own performance. NNHE left the company 2 weeks later. The press spun it as personal reasons. In the office, his nameplate was quietly removed, leaving 4 tiny screw holes in the glass wall, like pinpricks of absence. People walked past them as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't stop staring. The holes became another anchor in my mind, like the key, like the late-night messages. I kept my job, not a promotion, not applause, just the same desk, with the same view of the river. And that was enough. Because this time, silence wasn't submission. It was survival. Mini Hook. He thought I'd be his secret. Instead, he became the company's. Some nights I still hear it, the faint click of that office door closing behind me. It echoes in my head the same way the key once pressed its chill into my palm. I keep both reminders tucked away now. The mint tin on the highest shelf of my closet, and those 4 empty screw holes on the glass wall at work. 2 anchors, 2 scars. And colleagues eventually stopped whispering. New leadership arrived, full of slogans about transparency and rebuilding trust. On the surface, life moved on. I went back to my early runs along Suzhou Creek, the smell of steamed buns from the corner stall, mixing with the damp morning air. My spreadsheet filled with new hours, new projects. Yet sometimes, when a message notification lights up my phone at midnight, I still feel that same jolt in my chest. Trauma lingers like static, even when the music has stopped. I never told my friends the whole story. How could I? Who wants to admit they almost became someone's secret, someone's liability, just because they mistook attention for recognition? And yet, in a strange way, I don't regret the envelope or the choice to act. That was the first time I understood what boundaries really meant, that silence can be a weapon when used to protect yourself, not to protect someone else's lies. Last week, I passed by a newsstand. His face was on a glossy cover again, this time in New York, all smiles beside his wife. A new venture, a new city, the same immaculate suit. For a moment, I felt the weight of the key in my bag again, though I hadn't carried it in months. Maybe he'll reinvent himself 1,000 times and always land on his feet. Maybe people like me only get one chance to walk away. But as I stood there, neon reflections sliding across his printed grin, I realized I didn't care if he rebuilt his empire. I had rebuilt myself. And that's the part nobody puts in the headlines. Sometimes the real scandal is not what you do behind closed doors, but how you choose to walk out when the door finally clicks shut. Final question. If you were me, would you have returned the key or kept it as a reminder?